Good morning, students. Okay, we're going to go over this warm-up really quickly. You should have had a chance to do these. Hopefully you got through all 4 of them. The first thing is we had to put these numbers in order. Let me see what it wanted. From greatest to least. Okay, so I'm going to put G to L, just so I remind myself that I want to go from greatest to least. Now, I do see I have a fraction right here. I want to make sure that that fraction is actually in decimal form so that I don't confuse myself. So 3/4 is a fraction. I'm thinking to myself 3/4. That is the same thing as 75 cents. So it's going to be negative 0.75. I have negative 5.3. I have negative 1. I have negative 9. And I have negative 0.8. Okay, so now I'm going from greatest to least. So when I'm looking at negative numbers, it's the opposite from when I look at positive numbers. Okay? So when I'm thinking about the greatest negative number, it's going to be the one that seems to be the smallest number, the one that will have the smallest absolute value. Well, I'm trying to think, why is that? Well, if I'm thinking about money, I would rather owe less money, have a smaller negative amount than having a greater negative amount. Because if I have a greater negative amount, that means I'm much further away on my number line. I'm much further away from 0 than I am towards 0. So what I'm thinking is, thinking about 0 here, I have negative 1. That's pretty small. Okay. Negative 5.3, that's going to be further away. Negative 0.75 or negative 75 hundredths, that's going to be right in between the 0 and the negative 1, and it'll be a little closer to the negative 1. Okay, I put negative 3/4 because when I reorder it, I'm going to use that number. Okay, and then negative 9. That's going to be after negative 5.3. Okay, and now for the tricky part, negative 0.8. Well, I know it's between 0 and negative 1, but I don't know if it's over here or on this side. So let me look back at the decimal, 0.75 versus 0.8. Well, this has, 0.8 is greater, but as a negative number, it's going to be closer to the negative 1. So right there, I will have negative 0.8, okay? It will be smaller than this negative 3/4. So now, I need to go back to what they originally asked me, is to order these from greatest to least. So looking at my number line, I'm thinking the greatest things are going to be on this side. My smaller, least items are going to be over here. So I would start with negative 3/4, then negative 8/10, followed by negative 1, followed by negative 5 3/10, and then negative 9. Now I'm going to make sure that I included each number I had, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, on my paper, and I'm looking here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I kept them in the same form that they gave me here. Okay, now let's look at the next problem. I have negative 7 minus 15. When I get ready to subtract, I know I can simply change that operation to adding by the opposite. Okay, so now I'm adding negative 7 and I'm adding negative 15. So if it helps me, I can go back to having those counters. This would be the same thing as having 7 red counters. I'm just going to put R in here for red. And I'm going to add that to another set of 15 red counters as well. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15. Okay? So then I would just add up all of my red counters. Y'all, what's 7 plus 15? Hopefully you guys said 22. Okay, so that means I would have 22 red counters, and since it's 22, that red, that means it's going to be negative 22. Okay, now if I didn't want to do it this way, I can conceptualize it in a different way as well. I could think about my number line, right? There's 0, so I was at negative 7, and then I was going to subtract 15, which means I'm going this way, 15, and I would eventually get to negative 22. once I subtracted 15. Okay? Remember, add by the opposite. And when you add numbers with the same sign, you simply add those numbers and then attach the sign of those numbers. Okay? Next one. Triangle has potentially side lengths of 7, 10, and 3. And they already told us that this cannot form a triangle. We have to be able to say why it can't form a triangle. Well, when I have a triangle, I should be able to add any two sides. Okay, 7 plus 3 is what? 10. And when I add these, that sum should be greater than the other side. Well, look, 10 is equal to 10. So that is not greater than 10. Because this sum is not greater than 10, I cannot make a triangle there. All right, last problem. They told us that Billy has 2 late payments and a judgment on his credit report. Not good. So we're trying to figure out, is his score 615 or 462? Well, you guys, I actually went and looked this up because I've never had a judgment on my account. But what a judgment on your credit report is that is something that you had to go to trial, maybe for child support. You know, maybe some parents got divorced or something. And on your credit report or in trial, they said you're going to have to pay a certain amount of money. So because there was some case that someone was involved in, that Billy was involved in, and it said that he has to pay money out of his pocket to somebody, when banks look at him to consider giving him a loan, they already see that some of his money is tied up. So that is something negative, having a judgment that's reported on your credit report, not good. On top of that, he had 2 late payments. And let me tell you something, this judgment actually makes your credit score go down more than the late payments did. So he has a really low credit score. So now I'm thinking, lowest score is 300. 462 is pretty close to that. I believe he has a credit score of 462. All right, are y'all ready to do some work? Great.